As touching this subject of grace, it must be remembered that a realization of grace provides us with our supply. All supply is by grace, whether it is in a universal sense, such as the fact that there are cattle on 1,000 hills, that there is cattle on 1,000 hills, and that the earth is filled with treasures, food, vegetables, fruits, berries, diamonds, rubies, emeralds. This is by the grace of God. And when supply comes into our individual experience, it is by the grace of God, although we do not always recognize it. And therefore, to avail ourselves of the grace of God, it first becomes necessary that we understand that everything that exists on this earth, or in it, or above it, exists by the grace of God, by the love of God. God gave His beloved Son, our divine selfhood, and God has given this entire earth and all that is therein by His grace, by His love. But it comes into our individual experience by our recognition of that truth. In other words, we demonstrate supply spiritually only through our recognition of supply as God's grace. For instance, as we come to our table at mealtime, to recognize that everything on that table was brought forth only by God's power, not by man's, by God's power. Man can't make a tree. Man can't make a banana. Man can't make an egg. All of this has to come forth by the presence, the power, the law of God. Man can open out a way to bring oil out of the ground, but he can't put it there. Only God can do that. Man can take pearls out of the sea, but he can't make them, not the pearls that we speak of as pearls. All that is by the grace of God. The fact that we have the climates that we have, the fact that you can only grow orchids in the tropics and semi-tropics, and the fact that you have different foods in different climates, all of this must be understood to be through the grace of God. And when it is so understood, and you understand then that when you say grace at the table, you're not thanking God for having put food on your table or bought it, enabled you to buy it. You are thanking God or expressing thanks for God's grace in that God's grace is the producer of the food. So it is. Many businessmen, if they would only understand that the success of their business is not due so much to their great brain, as they would know if they could see a brain on a dissecting table, but rather the grace of God that functions through that brain and that gives to an individual his thinking power, reasoning power, intuitive power. If men would only realize this, that whatever their artistic ability or literary ability or inventive ability doesn't come from a piece of brain. It comes from whatever it is that is using the brain as an instrument through which it works. It is like saying that a great painting is due to a man's hand. Of course it isn't. A hand is a necessary instrument, but it's only an instrument. Take the grace of God away, and what would the hand be doing? It would literally be a lump of flesh. So it is. When you begin to perceive that every activity of life, whether it is out in the world of nature, whether it is in the world of your own being or own body, if only you can come to see that without the grace of God this would not be. Without the grace of God there would be none of these talents and abilities. There would be none of these great discoveries. Why? There'd be nothing to discover. When an Einstein makes his discoveries, always remember there was something there to be discovered. And who placed it there? Not Einstein. Not the inventors, not Edison, not Bell. They merely discovered that which God's grace created or evolved. And remember that they couldn't even have done that if God had not imparted to them the faculty of awareness, the faculty of perception, the faculty of reasoning, and the faculty of intuition. What would we be without these faculties, and where do we get them? And so it is that God's grace gives to this world all that this world has in the invisible first, and then the visible, and then God's grace gives us the perceptive faculties, the intuitive faculties, to bring them forth into expression and draw them into our individual experience. Now, when you understand this, when you understand that whatever qualities this water has was not imparted to it by man, it existed before man did to make use of it, that all that is contained in that water is so by the grace of God. And the fact that we have the power to assimilate it, digest it, use it, likewise is an act of the grace of God, because without that we could pour that into our stomach and it would lie there forever. It takes a power of assimilation to turn that water into our life stream. And that power of assimilation is by the grace of God. For we didn't earn it and we didn't manufacture it. It is given to us by the grace of God. So it is, grace is a most important subject, because without it no one can hope to attain the demonstration or realization or actualization of supply, whether it's the supply of money or food or clothing or housing or companionship. Unless you can see that in its original essence and nature it is ours by the grace of God, it exists by the grace of God, and it is ours by some divine faculty which is ours by the grace of God. This is acknowledging Him in all thy ways. It is acknowledging His grace. Now then, there are two steps in our spiritual unfoldment. when the subject of metaphysics was introduced into the world, it was given to us primarily for healing purposes. In other words, it was taught as a healing method, and it was used primarily for healing the sick. As the unfoldment deepened, it became clear that these healings never could be permanent, never could be satisfactory, unless a change of consciousness took place, not only in the patient, but much more so in the practitioner. Because if the practitioner remained forever on the level of just curing disease, they would make no progress whatsoever toward their spiritual development and unfoldment. Now, with the passing of centuries, we have learned through mysticism that it has always been known that there are two steps in our development and progress. The first step is in discipline, and in physical and mental discipline. In other words, if you can visualize back to the days of the caveman, or man at all before some measure of civilization dawned in his consciousness, you will find a lack of discipline. And in this lack of discipline, you will find his wildness or his evil. But as men, and here we can use the Hebrew race as an example, as man began to come under the law, discipline took hold on him. He was disciplined, first of all, to remember God. He was disciplined to not steal, not envy, not be jealous. He was disciplined into not committing adultery, not committing murder. All of this was a form of discipline, naturally in those days accompanied by "thou shalt not" or "God will do something to you." But the result of all of this was a discipline, and a discipline from others. In other words, people in and of themselves were not capable of disciplining themselves, and therefore there had to be a priesthood to see to it that people obeyed the laws. Now, as generation after generation came under this law, this discipline, and eventually more and more learned to discipline themselves, not needing so much of an overseeing power, as they learned to discipline themselves, their natures changed and their desires changed. They came under control. And so gradually there evolved a better state of humanhood. And that's what always happens when the undisciplined come under discipline. They not only learn to behave, but their very nature changes, and they lose the desire and the propensity for any undisciplined conduct or thoughts. So it is that in the earliest stage of our existence, we are disciplined as to our physical acts, and then we are disciplined as to our mental acts. Because you remember, when Jesus was still in the business of disciplining, he said that it was not enough not to commit the act of adultery, but even to think about it had to be controlled, because there was just as much evil in the desire or thought as there was in the act. And so, whereas first there was a discipline to rise above the person who was indulging, next there came the discipline of the mind so that it wouldn't think these undisciplined thoughts. And so we come in the master's realm to mental discipline. And in this begins the control of the mind. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. If you sow to the flesh, you reap corruption, but if you sow to the Spirit. In other words, if in your mind, in your consciousness, you dwell only on the physical realm of existence, that's what you'll bring forth. But if you begin mentally to dwell in the spiritual realm, you will begin to bring forth spiritual qualities. But remember, this is all a discipline. And the net result of it is that we become better men and women, we become more civilized, we become less materialistic, less sensual, less greedy, less envious, less jealous, and we gradually attain a higher state of humanhood. Now remember, regardless of how fine a human you ever become, you have not yet started on the spiritual path. If you could be the perfect individual, obeying all of the 10 commandments, you still could be 1,000,000 miles away from any spiritual sense, because obedience to the law does not make us spiritual, it just makes us good human beings. Never forget, however, that there is not much chance of rising into the spiritual realm if we haven't brought the mind and the body under some kind of discipline and control. Here we have this that has been given to us in the infinite way, that there is somebody called I, and I'm speaking now in the sense of I, Joel. And this I, Joel, stands behind his mind and body and can assume dominion over the mind and body, so that the body can't do what it wants to do. I am sitting here sort of controlling it, keeping it under my government. I'm speaking now in the human realm. And if I don't, my hand is apt to wander into your pocket where you have your wallet. That isn't good. The body must be under our jurisdiction so that we can say, I govern the body, I will take the body where I want it to go. Gradually we learn that before this can be a very successful experience, we must also have the mind under control. Now, in the human picture, as civilization has progressed, you do find that the vast majority of men and women have their bodies under control, all right, and they just do not go around shooting each other indiscriminately or stealing each other's wallets. But they still have great difficulty in bringing the mind under control. And there's where the difficulty comes in, and you've experienced it when you try to meditate and find out that you do not control your mind, but it is controlling you. It is telling you it won't be still. It is telling you what it wants to think, and that's always something different than you would like to think. And so you will find that there is a period when you bring your mind under control, when you realize I, Joel, can say to this mind, be still and know that I am boss. Be still, peace be unto you. Peace, be still, and I'm addressing my mind and letting my mind know that I am right here. And this mind is mine. I do not belong to my mind. My mind belongs to me, but it's very difficult to prove it in the way that Occidentals have been educated or uneducated for so many centuries, so that it has not been believed that the mind is ours. It has not been taught that the mind is ours and that we possess it and that we govern it and that it is for our use. But now we know that this is true, that the mind has no right to dominate me, but I have a right to dominate my mind and my body. Now, the moment that I realize this, I become more consciously aware of the I that I am. I become more aware of the fact that there is an I, separate and apart from mind and body, and yet governing mind and body, using mind and body, possessing mind and body. But I'm aware of the fact that there is someone called I, me, I, Joel. And now when I think of I, Joel, I don't think of mind or body, I am thinking of myself. I become gradually, I become aware of the fact that there is an I, Joel, an individuality, a being, a person, a something or other, and that by the grace of God I have a mind through which to function and a body through which to function, and that these are my servants, these are my tools, these are my instruments for living. But at least now I know that there is an I, Joel, and I know that Joel has a mind and a body. And I know right well that Joel is not going to live very successfully unless he is in control of his mind and body. And heaven help him once he lets the mind and body run away with him and dominate it and control it. But as long as there is a Joel, and I know him, and I know that I am he, and I know that by the grace of God I have been given this mind and body as instruments, and I now can live my life. Now I have become an entity, an individuality, a being, a person. You see, all of this is denied by socialism and communism. All of this is denied. You are not a person, you are a mass, you are a herd, you are an animal, or you are a group of animals to be used by the state, to be fed and supported from the cradle to the grave. All because you can't do this. You are just an animal. You are just part of a herd of people. And a few who have been given the power of guns, they can dominate you. And of course, lovingly keep you from starvation by their grace. All of which is not true, because you are not an animal and you are not a part of a herd. You are an individual child of God, and all that the Father hath is yours. All of the capacity, all of the intelligence, all of the love, all of the being, all of the dominion. God gave you dominion. You couldn't be an animal. You couldn't be a part of a herd. You are separate and distinct from everyone else on earth, and you have an individual God-given capacity for something. To some it is given to be ministers, and to some it is given to be doctors, and to some it is to be given to be teachers, and some to be given to rabbis or whatnot. But the point is that to each is given some God-given capacity and ability. And that sets you apart in your individuality. And it makes it possible for everyone. Was it Napoleon who said that every soldier has a baton, a marshal's baton, in his knapsack? And it is true that every individual has the capacity of the Son of God. Every individual has within his being Christhood, infinite individuality. But you never can attain it until you know that I am I, and that by virtue of the truth that I am I have this mind and I have this body and I govern it and I have dominion over it, and I am subject only to one thing greater than I, and that is the Father within me. Not that the Father within me and I are two separate beings. Oh no. I and the Father are one, but the Father is greater than I. In other words, there is an infinite source of being which is greater than itself in expression. And this the Master calls the Father within. This Paul calls the indwelling Christ. By either name, it is the same thing. It is that with which I am one, of which I am an emanation or expression, and it is this silent, secret, sacred, invisible withinness which expresses itself as my Joelhood, my individual being. It itself is universal being in that it is the I of you, and it is the source of your capacities and abilities as it is mine. But in its individualization, it is I, Joel. Therefore, God the Father is God the Son. These are one and the same. But God the Father is its universal sense, while God the Son is its individual sense. So it is then, that if I, Joel, know this, that my mind and my body are subject unto me, and I am subject unto the Father within, then I am in the position always of being able to live as a listener, as if centering my attention in this infinite storehouse within my consciousness, and drawing forth from that infinity my demonstration of life, my individualization of life, my individual capacities in life. And in doing this, I am not in competition with anyone. I am not in competition with anyone, and I do not have to compete with anyone for my success, because I am drawing forth my own individual capacities. If I, as an individual, forget this and want to draw unto me that which belongs unto someone else, then I have lost my contact with the Father, I have lost my oneness with my source, and I start to live out here on the forms that are already existent. And this the Master warns against. The moment you have forms laid up where moth and rust doth corrupt, the moth and rust will get them, and you'll find you won't have them. And in the same way, when you start to draw from what somebody else's is, you'll find it becomes very salty. It is only when you are drawing forth that which is your own, that which the Father has given you. And the only way you can be sure of this is fulfill yourself without having your eye on what belongs to your neighbor. Whether it's your neighbor's business or your neighbor's wife, makes no difference, or your neighbor's husband. As long as we are trying to draw from the world of effect, we are not drawing from the world, the realm of cause. Now just think of this. We have no need of anything that exists in the realm of form or effect, because every day the manna falls fresh. In other words, God's spiritual activity is flowing forth into expression every day. And therefore, we don't have to look to that which is our neighbor's. We can look to that which is flowing forth through us from our infinite source. Now then, while we think in terms of matter, we have to be socialistic or communistic, because we can count so many units and so many individuals and then decide that these must be divided among us, and of course there never can be enough. It is only when we begin to understand our oneness with God that we begin to see that God has enough for every individual, regardless of how many there may ever be, as long as those individuals are learning to draw forth from within themselves. I have said this to classes before, that there was a time when the papers were full of the news that if we weren't careful, oil would run out. There would be a scarcity of oil in the ground for our future uses, and we must begin to conserve it and hoard it. Two things happened about that time. The first one was they discovered these tremendous resources up in Canada, greater than had ever existed in all the rest of their discoveries. But if that weren't enough, a man in California discovered a tool that multiplies the amount of oil that can be drawn from a well by 4. In other words, instead of drawing up the oil just in the line with this pump, he has a circular arrangement and draws it from all around under the ground, wherever it may be, within the radius of that distance. And so we're not hearing today about scarcity of oil, but about the overproduction of oil and the oversupply of oil. And then there was another very famous thing that happened here last year, the explosion of population. And you remember how our great masterminds discovered how that is to be overcome, this scarcity of food that's due very soon. Not enough land to produce the food we need for these populations. We're going to murder them. Country after country is going to make it legal to have abortions and prevent childbirth and all the rest of these things. And of course we're going to let the population of China die out, and India too, because when they do, there'll be enough food for everybody. And you know what happened? Man in Israel discovered how to get fresh water out of the ocean for so little money that now they will very soon have all of the wilderness of the Holy Lands producing food. And as soon as that's done, we'll bring it over here and irrigate our land. The machinery is being made right here in the United States. And water will be brought forth for 40 cents per huge unit. And now we don't have anything in the papers about the explosion of consciousness, because the explosion of population, because we have found a way to feed them. Oh, I mean, the mind of man is devious when it isn't backed by the mind of God. But when an individual goes back to the mind or consciousness of God for a solution, he doesn't come forth with murder. He comes forth with multiplication, not division, multiplication. And so you're going to find, once the mind is disciplined, the body naturally falls under that discipline. And then the mind is free to turn within to the infinite source, which actually is the source of your own being. And this entire infinity, remember, is closer to you than breathing and nearer than hands and feet. So if you are a composer, don't stop until you've brought forth the greatest compositions that have ever been known, because they exist within you. And if you're an inventor, don't be satisfied with a little one. Go back, because within you is an inventive capacity that will bring forth infinity. You have the capacity because it is a God-given capacity, and you have the infinite inventions within you because all that the Father hath is yours. So it is. Don't try to skip the step of discipline, because you won't come to know yourself as I until you know that there is an I which can discipline the mind and body, and which can live independent of the mind and body. I and my Father are one, and that I lives in the Father. It is in the Father's consciousness. That's the story of the prodigal son. Before he became a prodigal, he lived in his father's house. And the moment he left it, he became a nonentity. But he became the son again when he returned to his father's house. And when you live in your father's house, believe me, there must first be a you. You must be aware of your identity as I. And then when you know that I am an individual, I am an entity, I am a being, I am an individuality, then go back and realize, yes, and I and my Father are one here and now. Where God is, I am, and where I am, God is, for we are one. And now I can go back to the Father's house and say, I have meat the world knows not of. And that meat is my understanding of my infinite individuality in God. That is my meat, and that is my wine and my bread and my water. That is my supply. The awareness of I. I have meat. If you don't know yourself as I, you have no meat, and you'll be out in this world trying to get it. And if you do, you'll only be getting a shadow. And you'll only be getting little crumbs from other people's tables. But if you want the abundance that is yours, and your right as the child of God, begin to know that I am I, and I and the Father are one, and I have meat the world knows not of. I have meat. I have wine, and I have water, and I have capacities, and I have supply, and I have dominion that the world knows not of, but the sons of God know. And whenever one son of God meets another son of God, There is a glint in their eye, for they know that they have met themselves. They know that they have met another of the household of God. They know that there is no envy, no jealousy, no malice. They know that there is no greed and no competition. They know that they can commune with each other without a single trace of competition or jealousy. No one spiritual master is concerned about the students or disciples of another spiritual master, for each has drawn to himself his own. And this would be exactly so in the business world. Each one would draw forth from his consciousness his own articles, his own products, and his own customers for them. And he would never have to think of depriving another of that which was theirs. But it all begins with the realization that first of all we must recognize ourselves as I, Joel, am an individual being, and I am one with my Father. And my capacities are not limited to my education or my environment or my personal experience, but I can draw on the infinite nature of my source, which is God, and thereby accomplish that which education or lack of it, or environment or lack of it, could never permit. So it is then, your meditations will become easier once you realize that you can say to your mind, peace, be still. You know, this is the symbolism of some of our Oriental art. You have undoubtedly seen pictures or statues or figures of Lao Tzu sitting on a horse backwards, not facing his head but facing his tail. And the meaning of this is that Lao Tzu, this mystic, this man of God, has control of his senses. He doesn't need to hold reins. He doesn't need to look where he's going. He is in control of his senses and can forget the human element of control. He otherwise is a master. Being a master, he doesn't have to observe the law of facing forward or holding reins or kicking the horse in the side. He just sits there and contemplates. He is in control of his senses, and that is what makes him a master. There are no masters except those who are in control of mind and body. And if they haven't that control, they are not masters. And we are masters only in proportion as we can demonstrate that the mind and the body are under our dominion. And this we do by remembering there is somebody here. This is not a body that constitutes me. This is a body which is an instrument for me. I and my Father are one, and I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, and all the Father hath is mine. I am subject unto the Father. I do the will of the Father. I do the will of no man. I obey the will of no man. I look not to man whose breath is in his nostril, and I look not to the favor of princes, for I and the Father are one, and I am subject only unto my Father, because I do the will of my Father. I have learned to turn within and receive instructions from the Father, to receive government and jurisdiction from the Father, to receive light from the Father. And so life becomes an entire matter of introspection, of withinness, and of letting this infinite God good, this infinite consciousness pour itself through me, as me, without my having to take conscious thought, but always be obedient to its leading. So as the Master was on the ship in the midst of a storm and says, "Peace, be still," do not believe that he was addressing a storm, because the storm didn't exist external to him. The storm was within him. Because a storm doesn't exist. A storm is a mental illusion, a mirage. And so it isn't externalized, and no one can say to it, "Be still," but we can say to the mind that's entertaining an illusion, "Peace, be still. My peace give I unto thee." Try it. Try it when you want to meditate. Say to your mind, "Peace, be still. My peace give I unto thee. The Christ peace give I unto thee. I bring to thee peace from my Father." And address your mind. And if you find your body getting unruly, don't be afraid to address the body, although actually it shouldn't be necessary, because the body is in the mind. And if the mind is brought into stillness, the body will be still, just as bringing the mind into stillness, the storm subsided. And so it is when you learn there is an I, and I am addressing my mind, and I'm saying to my mind, "Peace, be still. The peace of God be upon thee." Remember, Emmanuel, God is with us. We live by the grace of God. We live by God's government. And so, mind, be still. Peace be unto thee. Peace be unto thy household. My peace give I unto thee. And you'll find that it won't be long until the mind will settle down into peace, because you have asserted your God-given dominion over your mind. Don't try to control anyone else's. Be sure that you never do that. Only your own. Let us stop for a moment. Now you come to the final stage of your unfoldment, because now, with your quieted mind, with your mind at peace, now you begin to live in the way Paul described. "I live, yet not I. Christ liveth my life," because now you're not living any longer as a good human, and you're not even living as a smart human or a bright one. You're not even living as a healthy human. Now it is God living your life. It is God's wisdom that is manifested through your being. No longer your wisdom, no longer your mind or your wisdom, your intelligence. Now you have died to yourself. You must die to yourself in order that God be your mind, God be your wisdom, God be your love. No longer can you be a philanthropist. No longer can you take credit for doing good, for there is no such you anymore. Now God is you. God is living as you, and therefore whatever of good you bestow upon this world is not yours and is not you. It is God performing its function as your individual sonship. And you will find then that you begin to enter a whole new consciousness of life, in which you never can say again, "I would love to do things for the people of the world. I would love to do good. Oh, I would love to heal people. Oh, I would love to teach them spiritual things. You never will have that feeling again. You never will have any sense of wanting to do good, because there will be no such you. You will find that that which is now you is really the Christ, being you, living you, expressing as you, and it leaves you with no sense of virtue, no sense of being good, no sense of being honest, no sense of being moral. It just isn't you at all. It is a something that is living your being, and all of the qualities belong to it, or him, whichever way you like it. Then you will see what the Master meant when he said, my kingdom is not of this world. And here begins a whole new life. Now, in your metaphysical life, all that you have been concerned with is the demonstration of things of this world. Think it over, and you will see that you wanted a heart that beat more regularly, or a digestive system that operated better, or an eliminative system that operated better, or you wanted more dollars, or if you're in England, pound sterling, or if you're in Germany, mark, or you wanted transportation, meaning an automobile, or a seat in an airplane, or a room in a hotel. And you will find that your whole idea of demonstration was having either more or better matter, more of something of this world, which is no part of my kingdom. And you were spending your entire metaphysical energies on demonstrating something that from the beginning wasn't spiritual, something that never could have been gotten into God's kingdom. And so you will understand why it is written, take no thought for your life, not even of what you shall eat or what you shall drink or wherewithal you shall be clothed. Your only concern must be seek the kingdom of God and nothing else. And as you enter this stage, you will note to what extent you have been trying to improve the illusion instead of demonstrating yourself into my kingdom. And you will find that your whole metaphysical life has been attempting to demonstrate more of the illusion, a better illusion, a better dream, more of the matter that doesn't enter the kingdom of God. And you will begin to stop it immediately, because you will begin to realize, my kingdom is not of this world. Why should I take thought for this world? Why should I take thought for man whose breath is in his nostril? Why should I take thought for princes? Why should I curry favor? Why should I seek more of this world's illusions or baubles when I can be devoting myself to the discovery of what it means, my kingdom, my peace? There is the great object of living. What is my kingdom? And what is my peace? It's greater than finding a North Pole or a South Pole. It's greater than the discovery of the atom, to find my peace and my kingdom. So you'll find that once you have risen above the idea of improving the illusion, you will begin to seek the real meaning of my grace. His grace is my sufficiency in all things. And then you will learn that it doesn't take you out of the world. It leaves you in it, but not of it. You still handle dollar bills and probably more of them than ever before. And you'll still mingle with people, and certainly with more of them than you ever dreamed were in your world before. And you'll have closer contacts with people than you ever had before. But you'll find so few of the distressing natures of human experience. You'll find so few of the lacks and limitations of human experience, because they'll all be swallowed up in the infinite amount of people and the infinite nature of the spiritual love of the people with whom you come in contact, because now you are capable of loving them spiritually. You are capable of loving them not for their looks or appearances or for what they have or for what they can give you. Now you will learn to love them the way God loves his creation, without a taint or trace of self in that love. And all of this reveals itself only when we have entered the second stage of our life, and that is when we've risen above the desire to improve the illusion. Strange, too, that the very moment you stop being concerned about supply seems to multiply itself. The moment you stop taking thought about people, they all seem to flock to you and be loving. The moment you stop having anxious thought or concern for business has a way of being good. And it all happens by our being absent from the body. And there you have it. Be absent from the body and present with the Lord, and you will find that the entire body of your world, whether it's your physical body, your financial body, your commercial body, your family body, your home body, the body of your world will now become the temple of God, because your concern isn't for the body, but for abiding in God, and it now comes under God's jurisdiction. Be absent from the body. Be absent from concern about anything that is embodied as form. Don't become ascetic. Don't throw it away, but be absent from it with any sense of concern, anxiety, fear, and be present with the Lord. And this you will do automatically as the mind functions in stillness. In other words, as you have dominion over the mind and it doesn't rise up to govern and control you. The people of this world suffer because the mind isn't under control and it gets out of hand and dominates them. And then whatever comes into the mind out of this universal is thrown at us. Whereas in the stillness, when the mind is still and we are the captain of the mind, then you find that it is under the jurisdiction of God, just as you are. You are no longer so busy fighting your mind that you cannot receive God's instruction. Now, with the mind at peace and the body at peace, I can be one with the Father. I can be listening for the still small voice. I can be communing with God. I can be tabernacling with God. I can be absent from the body and present with the Lord. And that's the secret of the highest form of life, the spiritual or mystical life. Thank you